informational webinar on continuing and professional education here at the Center for Nonprofits and Philanthropy at Texas A&M University's Bush School of Government and Public Service. Before we get started, we'll just go through telling you a bit about our center here, our Center for Nonprofits and Philanthropy, which was launched in 2017. And basically, we were launched then, and our mission since then, and as we go forward, is to basically support the vibrancy of the nonprofit sector here in the state of Texas and beyond. And we focus on research, professional outreach, which is what we're going to talk about today with our continuing education programs and serving local communities so nonprofits can get better, go deeper, engage with us to serve as many people as you can in a quality manner. And then also our engaged learning. So the students and the other programs that we have, which include our Masters in Public Service and Administration, our Executive Masters in Public Administration, our Graduate Certificate in Nonprofit Management, and our 3 continuing education certificates that we're going to talk about today, our Nonprofit Leadership Certificate, our Social Justice Leadership Certificate, and also our new Fundraising Leadership Certificate, which will launch in January of 22, so in a month or so, and we're really excited about that program. As far as our values, we value nonprofits, of course, as we said during our mission statement. Opportunity for all really speaks to our diversity statement, where we feel like everyone needs to contribute to the sector. So all types, all cultures, regardless of your background, being able to contribute to the sector. And board governance and leadership, we tend to get into the expertise that we have here in-house at the Center for Nonprofits and Philanthropy. Those folks are joining us today, and I'll go through those on the next slide. And also our engagement, our responsibility, especially as a land-grant university, to reach out and serve our local communities, and especially across the state of Texas. Our team, in no exact order, but Dr. Will Brown is our director. I tend to focus on our outreach activities. Again, part of what we're doing today would fall in that category. We have Dr. Angela Seaworth with us today, who focuses on capacity and our philanthropic initiatives along with marketing. Nicole Collier, who is our research associate, and Denise Parker, who is our administrative associate. Again, we work as a team, small team, so we kind of tend to all do it all. And again, no exact order on the faces that you're looking at. So we just try to make it happen as best as we can. So the agenda for today is we're going to go through the educational offerings with a focus on the variety of our certificates that we're really proud about. So we'll go through the 3 of those that I mentioned just a little bit earlier. We'll talk about the program details, and then we'll go through each certificate individually, our certificate in nonprofit leadership, our certificate in social justice leadership, and our new certificate in fundraising leadership. And then we'll talk about registration information, and then go into a question and answer session for any of those of you that are joining us today that want to answer a few specific questions. Dr. Seaworth and the rest of our team mentioned already to you that they will be watching the chat function. So if any of you all have questions, feel free to put that in the chat. But it looks like a nice small group where if at any point in time you have a question, just feel free to use the raise your hand function, and we'll make sure to watch for those as well too. So feel free to ask questions at any time. Those offerings that I mentioned, let's first talk about our certificate in nonprofit leadership. This program launched in the fall of 2020, and that's really designed for nonprofit professionals and volunteers who are looking to sharpen their skills for career advancement and volunteer leadership. We've seen many of those who have joined us since 2020 have come in specifically to sharpen their skills that actually work in the field, and many of them have referenced that they're looking for career advancement opportunities. And so far, we have a pretty good track record of those that have been through our programs, taken on different roles at other organizations, and taken on more responsibility within their own organizations. The other pool of people we tend to attract for that program are volunteer leaders, so board members at a variety of organizations, those who either serve as board members or those preparing to become a board member at some organization. Our certificate in social justice launched just this year in the fall. We had a great group that came out for this to start with, but this certificate is really focusing on those that are looking to transform systems and structures at nonprofit organizations to become more equitable. I'll talk a little bit more in detail about that one personally, but really what this has to do with is how can we get more leaders of color in board roles and also executive leadership roles as staff folks within nonprofit organizations. Dr. Seaworth will visit with you a little bit more specifically about our certificate in fundraising leadership, one that we're really excited about. And again, that one will launch in January in just a month or so, but that one's really designed to cultivate fundraising professionals at nonprofit organizations. So again, really excited about that program and the 3 that we've developed up over the last couple of years or almost couple of years now. So as far as the program details in itself, and this is where you might have some questions, we'll try to answer most of those within this slide, but again, we'll come back to answer any specifics that you might have. But this is an online program. It's asynchronous, meaning that once you start the program, you're in there on your own for those weekly modules. And this is a non-credit program. So this is a non-credit continuing education, what's coined as professional education, for those, again, kind of looking to sharpen skills. I think about YouTube, how we go on there to learn things. I do it all the time, mostly in relation to working on cars and things like that. But this is a way for folks to come in that have a desire to learn something specific about nonprofit leadership, nonprofit governance, and be able to acquire that skill to take back into their own organization. So far, who we have attracted, we thought that when we built this program, it was really designed up for nonprofit professionals. But what we have certainly seen is we do have some corporate sector leaders that are coming in. I mentioned those that are volunteering on boards. We've certainly seen some charitable foundation staff members that have come in. We've had donors come in. We've had educators, both from the K through 12 field, but also higher education administrators, both in university environments and also 2-year college environments. So that's been fun to see and to watch those, or the variety of people that have come in and been attracted to our programs, again, over the last couple of years now. For all of the programs that we offer, we offer continuing education units through the international accreditors for continuing education and training. And so any one of you all that are joining us today that might be interested or have to acquire continuing education units, we absolutely offer all of those. And also really excited, especially for our fundraising certificate, but all of our programs, all of our courses for all certificates also qualify for the CFRE through CFRE International as well too. So those are the 2 accreditations that we have, including our own badging for all of our certificates as well. The courses are a 5-course sequence. So basically there's 5 courses for all 3 of the certificates. And those 5 courses are 3 weeks in length. You can earn your certificate in approximately 4 months. So this is designed where you can come in 1 academic semester. It almost mirrors our in-residence academic semesters, that you can earn that certificate in as little as 4 months. And we offer these programs in the fall and the spring and not over the summer. Usually we try to get feedback from all of our programs, fine-tune those programs, add to those programs over the summer, and also do marketing and recruitment to continue to attract folks. Let's see here. Let's go over to our certificate in nonprofit leadership, and I'll hand it off to Dr. Brown to kind of go through this and give some perspective on the foundation of our program.
Thanks, Kenny. I appreciate it. Yeah, so this was the one we started first. It was sort of a core area for us. So I teach a course in, the nonprofit management course. I've been teaching in that area for quite some time, and been a part of the development of the graduate certificate, which is a much more extensive sort of engagement with this material. We wanted to be able to take some of the what is really executive level. It's fairly significant stuff that we want to try and introduce people to, but we wanted to bring it down into a bit more of a bite-size form so that people could approach it and get some of what they need out of. So when we first designed this, we were looking at the graduate course in nonprofit management. We were looking at the graduate certificate and thinking about which topics, which ideas, which experiences would we want to be able to expose people for, right? So as you can see here, this introduction based as some leadership ideas. What does it mean to be a leader in these organizations? We introduce principles around strategic management. How do we think about strategy in a nonprofit organization? What are the ways that we approach this? And then key issues in regards to governance. And then thinking a little bit about performance management. How do we think about the way our organization achieves its objectives? And then close back out again with a leadership opportunity. So thinking about your individual role as a leader in these organizations and the way you sort of move forward. So it's a nice mix between some topical areas that we would expect executives and leaders of nonprofit organizations to be able to have some grounding in. And so it frames that. As Kenny mentioned, they're 3-week courses. They are online, but but one thing I wanted to bring up too is it's discussion based. So you actually, while you're not necessarily on at the same time somebody else is on, you're interacting with your peers that are in the classroom. So there's a pretty good actual dynamic week by week that you're responding to discussion questions. There's also assignments, but they're kind of if you will, they're a little bit they're a little lighter than we would see in a graduate course, in the sense that we say, here's this tool that we want to introduce to you or expose you to. So in the nonprofit strategic management 3-week section, we introduce you to sort of a framework for thinking about strategy in nonprofit organizations. We talk about it, we ask you to apply it and utilize it. So by the end of the 3 weeks, you've actually been introduced to a particular framework to think about strategy. You then are allowed the opportunity to play around with it and discuss it and think about the way it fits your organization. And then with peers, you have these conversations and be able to say, is it working? How does it work? What happens when we did this? And what did we find when we're having these kinds of conversations? So it's pretty tactical in the sense that it goes right back to your organization and can be applied pretty quickly, which was the other piece that we wanted to try and do. Go ahead and flip to the next one, Kenny, which is the people that are part of sort of managing and working with you while you go through each one of these courses. So you can see them there, right? So these are folks who've got pretty deep experience in the field. Angela, for instance, Dr. Seaworth takes the lead on the governance course. Dr. Kerr takes the lead on the performance management course. And so you can look up the profiles. I won't go into each one of these individuals and do the background, but they're well-versed individuals that are also engaging in the conversation in that discussion board. So they're interacting with you and reacting to your material and facilitating conversations both in the dynamic. Kenny, you didn't talk about the Monday office hours, but that's another thing that we try to do. On Monday, we bring together folks for about an hour, and the faculty are there in that conversation each week as well. So there's a dynamic where you can not only have a bit of a face-to-face time if you want it. It's sort of optional time, right? Because it's technically framed as an asynchronous. Use it when you can get in there and take care of it. We do ask you to stay on cycle with the weekly patterns. So there's an opportunity to talk with some of these faculty members, but they're there, they're live, they're engaged in the course with you over that 3-week period and paying attention to what you're saying online and providing feedback and giving you some response to what you're doing in regards to the material. Any questions about that certificate in particular? Again, we're happy to talk about those in a bit more. But that gives you a little bit of a flavor of what that one is. And then I think it goes back to Kenny to talk a little bit about the social justice. Is that right, Kenny?
Yeah, it is. I'll jump right into it. But the same thing here, just going back to the 5-course sequence, but to set this program up for you a bit. When we launched the center in 2017, again, is when I was fortunate enough to be able to join the school here. I came to the school as a practitioner, someone who worked in the field for, plus 20 years with, 12 of those at Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. And so when I started in the field, working, basically as a social worker in the mid 90s, I didn't really think about that. I didn't see too many people who looked like me who actually worked at a nonprofit organization. But the way that I walk into framing up the first course on social justice leadership in nonprofit organizations, at the same time, I also never thought that 30 years later that we would still see some of those same things where we're not seeing many people of color that actually work in the nonprofit sector, especially in the executive ranks as executives or C-level positions within nonprofit organizations, or at the board level where you had many people of color that are engaged in board positions. And that's demographic information that's tracked pretty well for 30 years. I think over the last 3 to 4 years, we have seen a bit of progress, but not anywhere near what we would call equitable. So the way that we try to frame this up is, what can we do as individuals, and also to frame it up just in terms of the way that we think about that here at the Bush School. What's our contribution to assisting nonprofit organizations, the sector in itself, to develop more people of color, to put time into developing more people of color, to position them for leadership roles within organizations. And then to do so, it's really going to take something transformative. So what are those things that we need to look at within the organizations, which is then what you'll see in terms of the classes that we get into. So what are internal policies? What type of investigation do we need to do as leaders at nonprofit organizations to see what policies exist or don't exist that have led to structure at these organizations to where the demographics have been pretty homogeneous and just persisted again over those 30 years. Again, going back to reflecting on my own career when I started in the mid 90s up to now, it kind of still looks the same. I walk into an organization, you don't see too many Blacks there. You don't see too many people from the Latinx community there, especially in those board roles and those executive leadership ranks. So basically what we try to do there is we just try to introduce and explore what are the inequities that we can identify at nonprofit organizations, and then what can we do to make a contribution to potentially making that better. When we get into some of the other courses, we tend to kind of focus on what are those skills as leaders that we need to build more inclusive workplaces, and then also to lead teams. So that's when we get into some of the cultural competency piece. What is the impact of culture on leadership effectiveness? And what are the struggles that organizations are dealing with? The cool thing about this program, just as we work with nonprofit organizations on a fairly regular basis, what we've heard is not many organizations know where to start. And so we feel like this program, this certificate, is simply a place to start so that we can be thinking about who we are as leaders and what we can do inside of nonprofit organizations, inside of public organizations to make things better. And then once we figure some of that stuff out, then we get into what are those policies that we need to think about a change or contribute in our individual organizations and also to the sector, to where we can frame up what our advocacy looks like and then utilize our agencies to make a movement, if you will. So that's when we get into the social justice policy and partnerships for change course to end with. So it's been very well received. We've had several folks that have joined us from a variety of places in the launch of this program. Again, something that we're really excited about. But we really try to start at a ground level to where, because we've had to ask ourselves those same questions. Where do we start? How do we address that? Just as Dr. Brown framed up in the certificate for nonprofit leadership, we started really internal in who we are and what we could present with some expertise as a starting point for organizations that are thinking about getting better in this space. Again, if we go back to, if you look at the subject matter experts, we have a bit of crossover because Dr. Humphrey also joins us in this certificate as well as our nonprofit certificate. But Mason Alexander Hawk is a Bush School graduate who is currently working on her PhD. Dr. Frank Ashley, serves as our senior associate dean here at the school. Myself, I took the lead on this particular program, and we're happy to have a peer who I've known for nearly 20 years now, who's done a lot of work in the advocacy space, Terry Broussard Williams, who's over in Austin, had this tremendous career with the Heart Association, and doing some good stuff on our own currently. I'll kick it over to Dr. Seaworth. Again, we'll come back to any questions that you might have, but I'll kick it over to Dr. Seaworth to go through the new certificate that we're really excited about in fundraising leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Yes, we are excited about this. And when people ask, why am I a fundraiser? I didn't just fall into it. That's what most fundraisers say. And it's my favorite question when I ask people why they're in the fundraising field and how they got there. I'd love to hear that story. But over time, what we found is that we who end up with fundraising responsibility, whether we're senior fundraisers or executives, rarely has anyone come through with technical fundraising training. We arrive at a point and then understand that, wow, securing resources is one of the most critical things that we can do to strategically manage our organization. So, that's when I started thinking about how can we try and help organizations become more sustainable. There are a couple of things. We need strong nonprofit leaders. We need to make sure we've got a great inclusive environment for people to work in, and we're bringing the right, all the right people together to help solve our issues. Absolutely. But we also have to make sure we know how to fundraise so we can advance our mission. That's definitely one of the levers that we can pull in order to try and make our organizations more efficient, is to be able to have raise the money we need and then to use it well. So this idea of fundraising is really still very strange to people who don't work in the profession. And over my 20 years in the field, I kind of joke and say, if I had $5 for every time somebody said you get paid for that, I'd be able to endow a lot of stuff. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we're providing the opportunity for people who are either executive directors or maybe board members who are serving on the development committee, that this is something very new to them. We need them to learn the fundraising field. The other thing, of course, are for the people who are fundraising professionals and are aspiring to maybe be a chief advancement officer or to move to a VP level. So the audience is really kind of broad in this and how our team built it, because we want to make sure that anyone coming through here will be able to understand how to lead that function for an organization. So it could be current professionals or those who have the responsibility but haven't had the training yet. And what we sat down, and I'm going to talk about our instructors in a minute because I'm so excited that they all said yes when we invited them to participate. What we started talking about is, what do these senior leaders need to know? And often, if they're coming from a corporate background or from a program side of the sector, right? Maybe they've been in program management for 20 years and all of a sudden they're responsible for managing fundraising. Wow, that's a whole new skill set that's separate from any of the other mission work. So what do they need to know? So we want to make sure that we're covering a few of these things. One, we're going to talk about how to create and nurture a culture of philanthropy within your organization. Okay. So we're going to talk about boards, because boards are very influential in doing that. We're also going to talk about how the leader of an organization has to support the fundraising team. And then how the fundraising team supports the rest of the staff and helping them understand fundraising and its importance. Because the one thing that I find interesting time over time, and I should probably write a paper about this, maybe some of my colleagues will encourage me to do it eventually, but fundraising is leadership. What other job can you all think of where you're going out talking about the great things we could do if we could all just come together and invite people into this mission? How can you help? Can you volunteer? Can you make a gift? We're asking people to do things in no exchange for them, right? It's not an even exchange where they pay for something and get a service. So essentially, the way I look at it is fundraising is leadership in itself. We're trying to make a difference in the world, and we're rallying the people around us to help join us in that effort. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about some of the technical stuff that we need to know. One, just understanding the fundraising function internally. We're going to talk about how to manage a staff, how the development team works with finance. What about advancement operations? A lot of these folks don't realize how complicated that can be. So we're going to talk about the breadth of that. And then we're going to dig in a little more deeply and talk about making the ask. And so anybody who participates in it, we actually have one of the classes that's just very focused on being able to state your case, develop that case, be comfortable stating it, and get comfortable soliciting funds. And then we're going to talk very specifically about prospecting, because that's, again, sort of an elusive thing for people to understand. And one of the questions I get frequently is, well, how do we find people who want to support us? So we want these leaders to understand that, prospect research and being able to invest in stewardship, all those back end office tools are really important. So your frontline fundraisers can spend more time visiting with people and asking for money than having to do all this, the back end in less efficient ways. So the 5 classes specifically with understanding fundraising, this is going to be one that encompasses more about philanthropy and helping people understand that if they don't really know about statistics in the sector. We're going to talk about trends in management. Right now, I think it's going to be a lot harder for us. It's always hard to find a good fundraiser, but now that we've got all this changing dynamics in our work environments, corporations are allowing people to work at home. We used to be able to say, if you're a fundraiser, you have more flexibility. Well, that's no longer an advantage. So we're going to talk about those things. Then in our leadership role in fundraising, the instructor really wants to speak to you and all of our participants about how to develop a mature development operation. He's got a lot of experience doing that. And finally, you can see we're going to talk about engaging the board and other people. And we are going to touch a little bit on diversity and equity on your boards there. It's a topic that I've studied and our instructor is also deeply committed to. So we won't skip over that. If you are in the fundraising course, you'll at least get some information about diversity, and maybe you'll want to sign up for Dr. Taylor's other course. Then the final one is when we're going to talk about building the systems for fundraising success. And this is really the prospecting and the back end piece of it. If you could switch to the next slide for me. So you'll see your instructors. You only hear from me once. I didn't want to teach more than one class. You need different voices. And we have people from all around the country. Dr. Bartolini has more than 40 years of fundraising experience. He's phenomenal. He's been the vice president of professional development for the Association of Fundraising Professionals. As his volunteer job, he's been at the highest levels of figuring that out. And he's been doing this for years. He was actually my mentor when I got the advanced certified fundraising executive. So I tried then to say, oh, don't you want to help your student one more time? And he's fabulous. He has worked in and all 4 of these instructors have worked across the subsectors. He's worked in a very small startup, health and human services, and his last job, he only dealt with gifts of over $5 million. So he can talk to anybody about, whatever size organization they're in. Dr. Zuniga and Dr. Acosta have very similar experiences as far as the breadth and size of organizations that they've worked with. One thing that's unique is Dr. Zuniga, her research expertise is actually in digital fundraising, and she currently is the CEO of the, which one is it? I'm sorry, now I'm forgetting which one.
Holocaust Museum.
Thank you, the Holocaust Museum. I've known Kelly for 20 years. She is the CEO of the Holocaust Museum. They've just finished a fabulous campaign, built a new building. She's got campaign management experience, but she's really committed to diversity in that role and is currently taking her organization through a board diversity program. And then Dr. Acosta, what's interesting with her, her dissertation was in studying Latinx giving culture. And she's worked with a variety of different institutions, but often found herself working with some of the constituents who weren't naturally connected to our fundraising. And that's really important for us in Texas. If we don't figure out Latinx giving, then we're in trouble. That's what she and I've talked about in our conversations. We really need to take the lead on it. So she's very excited about it, but she's the CEO now of a YWCA, in El Paso, and they were lucky enough to just receive one of Mackenzie Scott's $20 million gifts. So they're definitely working on building their systems and making sure they're efficient in their fundraising. So I hope that gives you an idea. It was fun to brag on them, but I hope it gives you an idea of the kind of folks that you'd be learning from here. Dr. Bartolini is in Ohio. So we've got Ohio, El Paso, we've got Houston. There are folks that understand the Texas market. They understand the national ecosystem for fundraising, and they've just got a lot of war stories. And that's often what we get criticized for in fundraising, is that it's just storytelling when we try and train people. And we say, no, it's not storytelling. It's storytelling and it's research based. So we're thrilled to have this team, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have. We're excited to offer this to nonprofits through the whole state.
Thanks so much, Dr. Seaworth. So for any of you all joining us today, just real quick on the registration information, we are certainly taking registrations for our spring 2022 program, and those dates are January 5th is when it starts, and it goes to May 24th of 22. One thing that we didn't mention is, as you complete one course, we usually do a 1 week break in between each course. Is one reason why that adds up to, right at that 4-month period. It's very easy to register, again, because we do have open enrollment, which basically means I spoke to some of the folks that we attract from different sectors. So regardless of education level, regardless of sector, with our open enrollment, it's very easy to get in there and register at cnpp.catalog.instructor.com. And if any of you all that are joining us today, of course, have any questions, you can contact, I mentioned Denise Parker a little earlier, but there's her email as well. And it's easy to find any of us to shoot questions to. I didn't specifically mention Alyssa Dooney and also Jackie Guerra, who are both students here, graduate students at the Bush School. They also help us with this. So it's easy to find any of us if you have specific questions. You'll see the badges that we have here, the badge for our Nonprofit Leadership Certificate, the badge for our Social Justice Leadership Certificate, and the badge for our Fundraising Leadership Certificate. We've seen that this has also been somewhat of an important feature of our programs, where we do offer badges and micro-credentialing for individual courses. And as we went through those individual courses, you probably saw that those are available as individual courses. Wanted to make sure to highlight that as well. Though most folks that have joined us, these are continuing education certificate programs, they have mostly opted for the entire certificates. But we have certainly had folks that have come in that just wanted to pick up one particular thing, mostly with Dr. Brown and his management course, that wanted to come in and pick up a specific course. And in that case, just for example purposes, that was an organization who was going through a strategic planning process. And what they did is they bought 4 seats. So the team that was actually working on their strategic plan at their organization wanted to come in and get some training for those particular purposes. So again, we've seen things like that, that the tools that we share with you in any of the courses, what we're seeing are these things have been, utilizing them on the ground at nonprofit organizations. So let's stop there and see if there's any question. It looks like there's maybe one in the chat. I can check that. But let's see here. Okay, so we just sent out the link where you can access all of our programs, as well as the link that I provided for you over to Instructure, which our website links directly to that as well too. So let's see, any questions from folks? Or anything else that we should add that maybe we left out to any of our team that's joining us today?
One thing that I would add is just to make sure that people understand if they're trying to either certify for their CFRE or recertify for it, that all of our courses have been pre-approved. So each of these certificates will earn 45 credit hours for you. So if you're certifying for a fundraising executive for the first time, you need 80 hours. But if you're going to recertify, which you have to do every 3 years, you need 45 hours of continuing ed. So one of these certificate programs could actually fulfill the education requirements for the entire 3-year period for renewal. So, and if you don't need it, please share that with your fundraising friends that are trying to do this, because it's always hard to find the good continuing ed hours.
Others, those that are joining us, any burning questions or why'd you join us today?
Yeah, that's what I was curious, is what organizations are some of you with, and how can we help? That's always a question I like to ask too.
Since we are professors, we're not above asking and calling people out. So, so maybe if I could ask Julia, what organization are you joining us from, if at all, and what made you join us today?
I'm actually in public relations, so I work for an agency, and I was just interested in learning more about this sector, and yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Any others?
Kenny, you made reference to some of our other programs as well. People can look through the website that we just sent the link over to. We've got a couple of in-person programs that people can take advantage of, a couple of half-day sessions with board governance. And so there's some other things there as well that people can kind of see, as well as quite a few resources that we have on the website. So there's quite a bit of stuff that's available out there. We've done webinars for especially when COVID hit. We did a number of webinars. We got another one coming up next week on governance. And so all of those are recorded and listed out on our website as well. So there's quite a bit of information if you're looking for stuff, or if you want to sort of get a better sense of who some of these people are. Several of them have done webinars for us as well. So that's out there too.
Yeah, appreciate you mentioning that, Will. So to anybody that's joining us that's up in the air and just kind of looking around, we made your short list, if anything like that. The resource section on the link that we just sent out to you will give you a true feel of who we are a bit more personally in terms of some of the webinars that we've led. Will also spoke to some of our other offerings that we mentioned. So we have a leadership and public service program, which is a 2-day in-residence training here at the Bush School. And then we also do a half-day training for leadership and board service. So back to that theme of those that are currently on boards and those that are maybe considering being on a board, where we go through a half-day session of best practices and being the best board member that you can. Charlena, thanks so much for your note. We appreciate you joining us today. Let's see, any other questions, comments, input?